Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I am disappointed that we are not having a serious hearing on how to improve USAID. There's room for improvement in every agency, as there is in almost anything that we do. But this hearing is simply designed to give cover for President Trump's unlawful dismantling of a congressionally established agency against the law and against the interests of this country and against the interests of many in this country, including American farmers who benefit from it. The Inspector General of the U.S. Agency for International Development, Paul Martin, has submitted a report. I ask that it be made part of the record if there's no objection. And in that report was critical of the so-called pause in foreign assistance funding, saying that it has delayed $489 million of food assistance at ports, in transit, and in warehouses. I'm quoting, at the risk of spoilage, unanticipated storage needs, and diversion. That's waste in government. And it's not just a little bit of waste, it's humongous waste, $489 million in those fees alone. He says the pause in funding and reductions in staff, including over 90% of BHA's workforce furloughed or placed on administrative leave, has undermined two key oversight mechanisms to assure accountability over humanitarian assistance funding, partner vetting, and third-party monitoring. I don't have time to go into the details, but that is also waste. And when we talk about the other effects of this pause, let's look at the effect on farmers, American farmers, who grow the food that USAID distributes. American farmers, in 2022 alone, USAID helped to distribute nearly 4 billion pounds of American-grown food to 58 million people around the globe. I know that some of my colleagues are reluctant to defend foreign humanitarian aid. It doesn't always poll well. It's humanitarian assistance. I think Americans are better than trashing the idealistic goals that have motivated our nation over the years, but putting aside the humanitarian instincts behind some of USAID, here's what American farmers have said in reaction to these actions. President of the Iowa Farmers Union said, quote, USAID is important for farmers. It's unfortunate that we would drop those relationships that we have built over time, end quote. The Ohio Farmer Union president said, quote, USAID plays a crucial role, not only providing food aid to millions around the world, but also directly purchasing grains from Ohio farmers. Ohio farmers are more than capable of rising to the challenge of feeding the world, but they need stability to do so. In shuttering USAID, President Trump is pulling billions of dollars away from American farmers without apparently a second thought. That's a lot of harm, that's a lot of waste, and a lot of abuse to people who are the backbone of food production in this nation. Already, a lot of their labor, investment, produce, going to waste as a result of the Musk power grab, slash and trash agencies in the name of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, but in fact creating it and profiting from it. Elon Musk is giving America the middle finger in seizing power, engaging in the biggest heist of information in America's history, delving into agencies and destroying them when his own corporations profit from contracts with them, and controlling contracts in the future that will benefit his corporations. That's waste and fraud, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The accusation or criticism has been made that this is an unserious hearing full of conspiracy theorists. Well, you know, the Democrats were asked to participate like they always are, the same way we were when we were in the minority. They could have brought a witness. They chose not to even bring a witness. I can't conjecture as to why, but maybe it's because it's so embarrassing, the stuff that USAID is spending their money on. Who could possibly be against ending $2 million for sex change surgeries in Guatemala? I mean, who wants to defend that? I haven't heard anybody yet defend the waste and malfeasance that's going over there. $3 million for girl-centric climate change. Maybe there's not a witness here. Maybe it's not serious. But I don't hear anybody explaining why we should continue to do that. Now, there is a legal question. There is a legal question. If there's $40 billion in USAID and they don't spend it at all and it just sits there, can the president impound it? This is a real question, and it may come to that. But I don't think any court is going to find that the executive branch cannot pause and audit spending. I mean, to crassly say and just to jump to this, it's illegal, it's unlawful, it's a tragedy, it's a constitutional chaos. Well, auditing spending is what government should do. It's the traditional oversight that hasn't been done in a generation. That's why we're finding this stuff. It's been creeping up for a generation. $4.8 million for social media influencers in Ukraine. I mean, if people want to defend that, step forward and defend it. We are finding waste and malfeasance. You also have to realize that when you have a social agenda, and your social agenda is, you know, LGBT, well, when you take that to a conservative country that has religious problems with that, and you want to foist it on them and fly flags, what ends up happening is that doesn't increase diplomacy, that actually goes against diplomacy. I don't care what people's views are on any of these subjects. You can have any view on LGBT, but it shouldn't be part of foreign policy to force this on everybody around the world. It just isn't part of government and should never be part of government. But we're only finding this out because we have a president with the courage, including the advice of Elon Musk, including the advice of a lot of us, who have been saying for years, we need to look at USAID and make sure that they aren't committing fraud. Look, this morning, the CFO of FEMA was fired because she's spending $54 million on luxury hotels for illegal aliens. My goodness, there's a lot of Americans struggling to find work. Laken Riley's killer, we flew him and put him up in a luxury hotel in New York. He was there for a few months. We spent all of our money on his meals, and then we flew him to Atlanta. And then he drifted over to Athens, and then he killed Laken Riley. Most Americans think that that's crazy and we shouldn't be doing it, but we are only finding it out because for once we have a president with the courage to say no, to go over there and put a padlock on the door and take the name down. But ultimately there will be a legal question. Can he impound it, or will it have to come back to Congress? I actually frankly think the better way is spend about $30 billion and send $10 billion back, and we do a rescission. There is a method for doing that, and I hope that is what is done. But even on the impoundment question, there are questions exactly, and I don't think it's ever made it all the way to the Supreme Court. There is court precedent on it, but we haven't gotten to that. A pause in funding is an impoundment. A pause in funding to do an audit is just good government, frankly. The question I have for the panel is this, though.
Mr. Chairman, may I just inquire?
Sure.
Because the chairman mentioned that we don't have a minority witness. I would suggest, and speaking out of turn here, because the ranking member isn't here and I don't purport to speak for him.
We're docking your time for next week. I'm just kidding.
But I would respectfully suggest that we have Paul Martin, who was fired as Inspector General, come before us.
We didn't
along with-
deny any witnesses. Your side did not put forward a witness. We did not deny any witnesses. You didn't put forward a witness. So, but I just think it's disingenuous to,
Well,
to
rather
sit
than
there, and it is a
standing-
personal attack on me to call this unserious and a conspiracy, a bunch of conspiracy. It's an attack on our witnesses as well. That is a pejorative, and that's name calling. All right, you're welcome to object to things they say and have facts to counter them, but to call this an unserious hearing of conspiracy
I
theory.
never used that term, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you said it wasn't serious. You said the hearing wasn't serious.
I
And the thing is, y'all chose not to participate in it, so that's on you.
Maybe we can have a second hearing, because this is such an important
We could have a
topic.
dozen on this. There's so much to talk about. But anyway, I think we ought to be, I'm not criticizing your ranking member for being unserious or a conspiracy theory. He has his opinions. We make our arguments both sides. But if we call names and say, oh, well, your ideas are conspiracy theory, that's a pejorative, and that doesn't get us anywhere, frankly. And because it's also dangerous in the sense that many people who are then say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, well, government should suppress that. This is what went on. We had 23 scientists come forward in Lancet and say that the possibility that the virus came from a lab in Wuhan was a conspiracy theory. And then government promoted back to Twitter and others and met with them on a weekly basis trying to suppress. Facebook for a year and a half said that ideas like mine, that it could have come from the lab, were to be suppressed. Michael Schellenberger, why don't you, if you wouldn't mind responding to how the government was involved with trying to suppress speech that you found out through Twitter files?
Well, sure. And also, I would think whenever you hear somebody accuse somebody of a conspiracy theory, I think you should consider that they are themselves spreading disinformation. In other words, we know that the proximal origins paper that you're describing there, we know from their internal discussions that those scientists were pursuing the lab leak theory. We saw it in their Slack messages. And then they got a phone call. They talked from the higher ups, and then they ended up changing their whole hypothesis over a weekend. So we've seen repeatedly that term used to dismiss very serious evidence of misconduct and of actual conspiracies. We've seen the rise of an entire censorship industrial complex. There's no theorizing here. These are just the facts of the censorship industrial complex that was created by the Department of Homeland Security starting in 2021. Really started before that in 2020, all the way culminating to the Disinformation Governance Board, which was so Orwellian that even Democrats had to back away from it.
Senator Hassan.